that exist online, those ones can no longer be classified as unbanked from what we are seeing here, because everyone that exists online, they have a bank account. And that's 97.5% of people that exist online, they own bank accounts. So if you're talking of unbanked, you have to go offline, like some of the companies that we're talking about here did. And we've also seen how it played out for them in a very well and interesting manner. Now, people also, 77.3% of the people that took part in this survey also acknowledge that fintechs will definitely replace all their traditional banks. And it kind of makes sense, because in Nigeria, the beginning of this year, end of last year was super interesting for us with the whole Naira redesign. And we got to realize, our banks is not really banking the way we've been, estimate or just raping them or putting them on that pedestal. There is still so much work needed to be done. And they also didn't step up to that occasion. So, next slide. Some of the features that exist within fintech platforms that will most definitely, replace these traditional banks goes from investing, but mostly making payments and receiving payments. That's something that people do on a daily basis without even paying attention to. If you took an Uber here and you pay with your card, that's making payments. It adds to the 1.5 billion daily transactions. Now, most people, loan kind of went down. That's something interesting which I also want to point to. All right, the next one. Then uses of fintechs. If you are designing for tomorrow, you have to start looking at what's happening today, how people are behaving today, and some of the features that are going to be increasing in terms of usage in the next couple of years. Can be saying you're making payments, receiving payments. Now pay attention to loans, which people are estimating that loans will only increase by 7.4%. I don't know if this goes, more to the bad rep that comes with loan companies, where, if you're owing them, they just harass you until they get their money back. But uses of fintech apps that will decrease in the future, loan takes a whopping 29%. Now, this is only just the top 5. There are other features as well. For this study, we are focusing on the top 5 alone. Thank you. All right, next slide. Now, when we now look at satisfaction levels, we see that Africa, is a really big continent, but enough of that talk about, Africa is one. We are highly diversified. In Nigeria alone, we can look at how people in the north, the payment methods that works for them differs from what works in Lagos. So if you are going into those other regions, you have to modify your approach, and that's where I want to talk about OPay and PalmPay, which in Lagos, they might not be so popular, but every time I go back home, everyone I know is using these platforms, right? Another interesting part is MoneyPoint, which is a year, but it's in the next. MoneyPoint, someone legit said, so I have 10 minutes? I just started. Okay, someone legit said that with MoneyPoint, every time they want to make a POS transaction, if it's not the MoneyPoint POS device, they're not sure if it's going to be successful. So they just start having doubts about that. But yeah, it gets interesting because M-Pesa has always been popular in Kenya. The way they are solving their, the payment solution in Kenya might probably not work in Nigeria or in South Africa, but in East Africa, it works really well. So they are super big. All right, next slide. I'm just going to rush through this. Savings, like I said, some of these are already well known, but what you don't know is, if you look at the saving companies in other countries, the way they are solving for payments in those countries might not work in Nigeria. But if you look at their business model, you might learn something interesting that might also make your own design solutions more interesting, or bring like a refreshing approach to how you're solving it in Nigeria. All right, next slide. Thank you. Now, with loans, Fair Money has always been big, but look at MoneyPoint right in there among the top 5. So many people probably wouldn't know, because MoneyPoint took a lot of people by surprise. The MoneyPoint, they are up there when it comes to loans. All right. Thank you. Yeah, so like I said, all of those companies that I pointed out in the previous slides, they all share this feature as a top feature, starting with good UX, which is a big deal because was hand in hand with PainPoint. If a design is really good, it means it's solving a problem in a very well and excellent manner. So, and going by the next slide. Next. Yeah, PainPoint. Why some of us here might not really be experiencing issues when it comes to payments, we really look at the fees part, or I mean, everybody here is kind of earning what I want to assume. So fees, how much will it charge? You know, you probably don't bother about that. Or it will cost $5 to create a virtual card. Sure, let's do it, right? You probably don't care about that. But fees is a big deal, and 49.2% of people pointed this out as something that bothers them when making or engaging in, you know, some of these online payments. Now, my question to you guys are that this is more of a business decision than a design decision. So as a designer, you can probably design and cushion that problem, but the problem still exists. So, all right, next slide. Which, you know, as designers, sorry, next slide too. As designers, you know, we have to do a lot of things at once, and we are also expected to do these things excellently well. From, you know, researching, you're not a researcher, you're a product designer, but research, oh, why didn't you conduct research on this? How do you evaluate some of your design decisions? How do you even know if you're making the right design decisions, right? So these are some of the things, and with research, it's not so easy to break into research if you're a product designer, mostly because of all the mystery around it. People say, oh, I did research for my studies. What exactly did you do? You know, was it secondary research? Did you just ask friends and families? How does that translate to the 200 million Nigerians that will probably be using this product? And looking at that is where we are trying to simplify in terms of research from typical research processes, which, you know, you have a problem, you have a question that you want to get some answers on, and at that point, there's a lot of excitement, you are curious to know what you'll find, and then you now start preparing to conduct that research, and you get underwhelmed because, you know, the process of preparing for research and the actual research is, so before you even get to the answers, which is exciting, is what we at Kimoyo, I don't know if you can skip, yeah, refer to as the big wahala. There's a lot of things involved, from preparations to, you know, preparing your study guides, how you want to ask the questions. Sometimes a participant is not a bad participant, you just don't have interesting questions to ask them. Or, you know, sometimes the question that they're asking isn't really something that is supposed to give them, or is supposed to allow them give you the best answers. So the questions are super important, you know, and then you now start thinking of recruitment. Expanding into maybe countries like Senegal or Cote d'Ivoire means you also have to start looking at people that speak French, and you're in Nigeria, we don't speak French for Jack. So French, who is going to translate that? Who's going to handle that? How do you ensure the person that's going to do, moderate the study, ask the questions, you know, exactly the way you want them to ask, even though you were explaining your questions to them in English? How do you transcribe that so that people that are paying money for you to conduct these studies, no, you actually did the studies and they got good value for what they're trying to do? So this is the big wahala which we at Kimoyo are really solving for. And also, for the purpose of this survey, looking at the fintech space and how it can better, you know, improve that experience. Next slide. So like I said, some of the steps here, we've automated them successfully, from recruitment and scheduling to compensation. All those ones have been automated. Next one is, you know, how to analyze findings and also get those strategic insights and guidance on what to do, because asking the questions, you get answers. Now from those answers, how do you now know what to do with those answers? Someone says, I'm not sure how I feel about this. And then you now keep asking and they say, oh, your fees are too much. How do you now cushion that as a designer? You know, do you start explaining? Because maybe we have a card provider that assumes maybe every failed card charge is a fraudulent charge. You know, it means we need to ensure that we are still in business. So you have to take all of this serious. One is that I'm using this because it's the most, I don't like you. I'm using this example because it's the most recent case which a company that is handling virtual cards, they've come out to really explain the way cards work, and it makes a lot of sense why they want to behave that way, right? So it's not like they're really strict with their business, they just want to make sure that other people keep having access to cards, especially when Nigeria doesn't have the best reputation when it comes to fraudulent charges. So that's one of the things that we are trying to automate at Kimoyo, and the good news is, all right, next slide. This is basically what we are building our business around, you know, taking the wahala out of research. And for everyone here, planning to conduct studies or signing up right now to conduct studies, you get a really, you know, generous discount. Like I said, we are super generous, you know, both in how we compensate and also the cost of funding these studies. So that's basically it for my study. Thank you so much, everyone. I don't know if there's any questions. Yes? Yes? All right. Yeah. Yeah, so I think the biggest part to be to running a startup is when you're still trying to validate your business ideas. Usually engineering is the easiest part in running startups, is budgeting or getting business ideas, especially if it involves partnerships like what you just described now. I, I don't think I have the answer to that because if Flutter isn't up and operating, you probably won't be able to integrate and use their platform. But what we've done at Kimoyo, especially with compensation, there's a time when Flutter F Kenya Rails was down, due to the old stuff, and we had to figure out ways to, get someone on ground, and then we sent. But like, it wasn't the most seamless solution, but it was super manual and kind of a hack. But it involved getting someone there that had access to PayPal, and they will send to them, and then they'll compensate. So it wasn't the most straightforward. Probably, pending when companies like this also get their stuff up, might probably also look at innovating around the problem or outside the box. That's not a very helpful answer because if it's not there, it's not there. Yeah. Okay. All right. Mm. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to answer this with something an act which I discovered recently. But I discovered recently that I could fund my USD DOM account with PiggyVest, and this is a feature that exists on PiggyVest, but I'm not sure so many people are aware of that feature. I don't know. Am I the only one that got really excited after discovering that? Yeah, so you could fund your USD DOM account from your PiggyVest USD savings or is it wallet, and it works and it's instant. Well, you get to the next day, but it's super fast when you're thinking of DOM accounts and how fast they are. So sometimes these features exist, and maybe because companies are trying to keep it low, so people don't take advantage of that. Even though it's going to bring them money, but they have to keep their pipeline money, and might not really be wrong. So that could be one of the reasons. Another reason could be, maybe they are just not really putting it out there, or reasons based on them. But some of these features can be interesting when you eventually discover them, and you make a lot of selling and so on. And then you start to wonder why are they not really fitting it out there to use it, because it's not that making money from it. Okay. All right. Can I take a question? One skill which I've discovered to be very useful for someone that's conducting research is you having curiosity. And if I get on a video call with someone and I don't have any questions to ask them, it means I'm not just curious enough to want to know more about them. So that curiosity needs to be there. Now, in terms of analyzing data, I don't think it's a very straightforward way unless you have like a lot of data. Maybe if you get like 1,000 responses and you have 200 people saying the same thing, that could give you some ideas. But if you're running a study and you're talking to like 5 people and maybe 2 people agree, 1 person doesn't agree, and the other person just doesn't know, you really can't get much from there. So this is where you have to get curious enough to ask them, just so you get something widely different, or maybe they're not communicating it clearly enough. And the more curious you are in asking, the more you get to find out exactly why they're, maybe giving you that reply or why they're saying that. But it comes down to curiosity. Same thing with meeting people in real life too. All right, thank you so much. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. So I'll quickly call out the next session. So it's back-to-back breakout sessions. So we're not going to the main hall. We have 2 more breakout sessions. Okay, so in this hall, this is Sapphire Hall, right? We are having Eniola Ogunsola. I'm sorry if I did not pronounce your name properly. I'm sorry. But she will be taking us on designing for the environment. Bracket. Africa, the impact of design in climate actions. And she's here. If you're interested in listening to Ejiro will be talking about designing for accessibility, a UI engineer perspective. You want to listen to Ejiro talk about accessibility, go to Emerald. Emerald is upstairs, not the main hall, upstairs. We have volunteers that direct you. Then the last one is Stephanie. Stephanie, that's the data designer. She's going to tell you about designing for users and business. That's the main hall, Ruby. Stay for. And Yolanda has a good stuff for us, so please let's not all go.
Name is Eniola. And interestingly, I was kind of expecting this turnout for this kind of conversation, because in my experience of talking about climate action, I begin to realize that it's a talk it's not to convince you, one, as designers, that design actually solve real problems, right? Or we prefer real value as designers. Because, I mean, the real world, you just say, oh, additional just drawing stuff or coloring stuff. And nor is this conversation to convince you that climate issues is actually a big deal. According to the United Nations, if you're very conversant with the SDG goals, you'll be reminded over and over that it is the biggest problem that the modern society is facing right now. And usually, we kind of leave this problem to government to solve, because we just feel like it's such a complex, multifaceted problem, and it's just very hard to address as individuals, which is why I'm going to be talking about design for the environment and the inputs of design in climate actions. And I would like to focus really on Africa, because Africa, and my agenda is really to talk about, one, the cost, what it costs us as a continent, why it is not a conversation, the role of designers in the era of climate crisis, and that adaptation cannot be achieved alone. Some of my absolute favorite examples, and also some questions. So my name is Eniola Ogunshola, and I'm a product designer working at Superlist. But outside my day-to-day job, I love conversations around climate in relation to design. And this is because, so backtrack, I have design, and not just product design now, in more of like the general scope of design. I studied architecture in uni, and one of my absolute favorite things is how architecture exposed me to how much of a problem climate is. And I remember from my year 2 to my year 3, my year 4, every project that we did was really around sustainable architecture. How do we build around stuff that lasts long, that is reusable, recyclable? And these are words I kept on hearing for years. And this, again, because climate is actually a really big deal. So we now start talking. Next slide, please. The cost. How much does climate issues cost us really? First slide. So there's a term for the cost, actually. They call it the cost of environmental degradation, COED. And in 2017 alone, in West Africa to be specific, there were over 20,000 deaths in 2017. You know, climate issues is one of those things that actually kill human beings. People die, even in Nigeria. You might live in southwestern Nigeria, in Lagos, and you just live in this tiny bubble and not realize how much it actually affects you, right? I tell people that every analysis. Again, it's really not a problem because we think it's very far off in the future, but it's actually ripening right now in front of our very eyes. The second thing is that in Cote d'Ivoire, about $2 billion, which is equivalent to about 5% of Cote d'Ivoire's GDP, was lost due to climate issues, right? The third one is Benin, which is a very, very small country compared to Nigeria, about $229 million, about 2.5% of their GDP was also lost. Well, that's inverted. Also, in total, in 2017 alone, was about $3.8 billion. And out of those 20,000 people that died in 2017, about 5,000 of them were children under the ages of 5. Again, it's a very big problem. So this is just to put it into perspective. They might be living in the bubble. It doesn't affect you much. Yeah, it gets flooded every now and then. Yeah, you see it on Twitter, Lekki is flooded. But it's a big problem. And it's even bigger than fintech issues, by the way. It's bigger than every other industry in Nigeria. So next slide, please. And in Nigeria specifically, in 2018 alone, flood, erosion, and pollution in Cross River, Delta, and Lagos cost Nigeria $9.7 billion. And last year, about 600 people died in the very big flood that we all heard of. 2,407 people were injured, about 1.3 million people were displaced, and these people up until now still don't have a home. Now to even bring this closer, I mean, Cross River and stuff might be very far away. In 2011 in Ibadan recorded the most amount of rainfall in Nigeria's history, and over 1,000 people died just in 2011 in Ibadan, right there. So all of this is just to put it into perspective, that we don't talk about this enough. And we can't wait until it's like there and there before we start solving those problems. So the question now is that, why are we not talking about it? Next slide, please. Africa is still developing, and this can mean there's a focus on building capacity and meeting basic needs rather than solving climate problems. And because we are still so small, we're still like focusing on poverty, and also we think that because we're really not the ones, polluting the world, we have a lot of trees, it's really not of our concern, right? We think China should handle most of it, but we're forgetting that it's really one planet, and whatever China is doing is going to affect Africa as well. And last thing is that environmental issues can be very complex and multifaceted.
And the reason is because climate change is really not from one problem. It's like from several problems that human beings have contributed to over a long period of time. So it's really hard to just say, oh, this is what we're going to focus on and solve, right? It's just very, very tricky. Now, what are the roles of designers in the era of climate crisis? We spoke about it, the more we realize that it's actually a problem to start considering other people. So like I'm doing right now, I'm pretty much like advocating for climate change right now. So it's a conversation we can actually have. It doesn't actually take too much. It's just like pointing these numbers to people and making people realize that it's as much as a problem as fintech is. Next slide, please. So this is one of my favorite people. She's called Lead Graph, and she's what people, or I'd like to address myself now as climate designers. And she mentioned that a recent study shows that climate change and extreme weather events such as hurricanes, floods, and fires directly impact 70% of all economic sectors worldwide, right? And if she translates this into simple terms, that 70% of companies, we need to start designing ways to deal with the consequences of climate crisis. So all those problems are starting from very quickly. So there are about 8 of them. There is minimalism and simplicity, which a lot of UI designers probably know I agree with. There is energy sufficiency, there is behavior change, circular economic principle, sustainable material choice, accessibility and inclusion, collaboration and advocacy, and user empowerment. So I'll be talking just a number of them, right? And the first one is minimalism and simplicity, which kind of like trickles down into energy and sufficiency. And it's that we as designers can optimize the amount of energy our digital product consume. Everything, again, is kind of linked together, right? If you make your website simpler, or if you try and reduce the amount of, that this is actually, again, a problem. I want to start paying attention to it. Next slide. So, this slide, I made it big because I wanted to emphasize on it a little. And it's talking specifically about the impact of a website on the environment. And says that while the general trends are surprising, you might still be wondering, how much does one simple website actually impact the planet? And there's in fact a way, same with accessibility checkers, there's a website called websitecarbon.com, which can estimate the amount of carbon footprint on a web page. Next slide. And this is 2 different websites. There is Ostinger.com and there's BBC.com. And I try to like compare them so you can see just how much one website can contribute, right? So Ostinger is, first criteria is the general cleanness on the website. It's cleaner than 67% of web pages tested, right? And there is B, what we do best as designers really is to interpret things so that the regular person can understand it, right? It's to work with scientists, help them do things like break down data into the smallest form so that everyday person can understand it. Because data is very complicated, if anybody knows that, and it's a lot of things when it comes to climate, right? So it's pretty much helping to even break down the conversation around CO2, explain what CO2 is, how every day you produce CO2, how you can just, like, when it gets to this point, what can you do? Regular everyday people, right? So this is pretty much it, sharing knowledge, collaborating, and advocating for sustainable design practices. Next slide. Anyways, this couple of projects, next slide, are all talking about my favorite project within Africa on how to solve this. And this is actually my favorite. So what these people do is that for every single search that you search on their website, right, they are planting a single tree. So if 100 people on their website every day, they have to plant 100 trees. And what they do is like giving money to like planting organizations. Next slide. And yeah, I explained Lyft earlier. Next slide. And Airwork also is pretty much a dashboard. I worked on this project and I'm so glad I did. Because what Airwork does is that in West Africa, that's a problem, flooding, rain. And what it or more energy for the amount of media assets that are playing. Like a lot. When you get there, you most likely see the previous.
Has anyone seen it?
I'm a creative director at Belong Woods, and
yeah, so these are the humans of Belong approach we have. So Belong Woods encompasses both brand identity and art direction. So you do a lot of commercial set design, production, and so on. So this is like a quick reel of some of our works. It's supposed to be sound, but you just have to enjoy it without the sound. So moving on, these are like some of work in progress. This is that's one of the ARF guys that makes up the team. So I think we are very excited people, and for the past couple of months we've been working remotely, yeah. But we just wanted to get some more human touch, so we started to explore different workspaces all around Lagos. So we have actually toured all the way from VI, and legit we are currently in Ogun State. Like this, for real, we found a workstation in Ogun State. We are currently checking out. Maybe we are going to go to somewhere else in Lagos next. Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, so this is just a continuation of that. Today we'll be speaking about storytelling in design with a focus on brand identity. I've been very privileged to work on a wide range of projects. This is just the ones that can contain the screen. I didn't know the screen would be this big, would have filled it up properly. But like, there's no limit from tech to fashion to music, whatever, we do it. So we're going to be specifically talking about sporting Lagos today. And yeah.
Okay, so I got a brief, or I got a call rather, or a text from Okwemiko, and the conversation was they're launching a new football club in Lagos, and essentially they wanted us to do the brand identity. It felt like a very, very exciting brief because, I mean, not too many people get briefs like this where you hear that you have to design the identity for an actual football club. So the brief essentially was, how do we create a community of people that really love the sport football and are enthusiastic about it? And how does sport as a unifying element become the element that it? But then again, we're like, a football club? Because only if, like, probably just one person in the team that actually watches football like very enthusiastically. So we were like, are we sure we're the right team for this? So what this meant was that we had to do a whole lot of research because none of the work that we were going to do was work that we already knew about. So we did a whole lot of research, and it was apparent that we needed to research on two things: understanding Lagos in itself and also understanding football as a sport. So our research spanned from multiple different variations with tinkering on understanding how communities and visual identities apply to communities, also still trying to understand how these communities have a visual narrative and what the visual landscape is, also trying to understand how individual places and how a lot of, sorry, I'm a bit distracted, but how a lot of elements that resonate when they tried registering it, and Lagos State said, no, you cannot register it. And they started looking for alternatives. So there was Atletico FC, then it moved to Sporting FC of Lagos, then it was Sporting FC, then eventually it was Sporting Lagos. So all the while when this was happening, we were already in our research phase, working on how to understand and properly visualize the brand perfectly. So we started working on strategy, and majority of the things regarding strategy was how do we leverage elements that existed in the sport in general, and how do we really bring in this strategy and create a visual identity that people see and it resonates with them. So
I think it's important to, I mean, many apologies for the passing of mic. The intention was for it to be very conversational, but unfortunately you can't hear me. So just to make you understand what he is saying by nobody watches football, I've never played football like with my leg in my life. I don't play the sports like game, and I don't watch it. I think that's the same thing for Jordan, yeah, and I think that's the same thing for everybody else on the team. So there's just Mayowa that watches football, and it's just a little. So it's just like saying fix a trailer engine. That was literally the task. So we were not even researching for strategy. We were searching for what is football, what is halftime. I don't know what offside means, like legit. So it was not. I'm just saying so you can understand what we mean by research. We had to go and research what football meant. Like how many play? I mean, it's like 12 players. 12. How many players? Anyways, it's okay. Please. This is my class. Thank you. Anyway, so that was pretty much the kind of research we had to do. So it's not even the work research. It was football research. And now that's just one part of it. I am not a very outside baby. I'm always inside my house. My parents, like, they always lock me in the house. I think that's a lot of it for Jordan and everybody else. So it was not just understanding football, it was also understanding Lagos, because you are designing. Okay. So the slides are actually a lot, so we'll just run through quickly because we have 20 minutes. So we just wanted to leverage elements of sport, people, and the place. That's Lagos, the people of Lagos, and the sport itself. More than anything, so if you find a Yoruba person, you see Yoruba people that have the R factor, that say, I don't know, but if Igbo, okay, so if you say like an Igbo person, they'll say something like, I know the Hausa one, like, preach, doesn't speak, you can almost tell where they are from. Same thing with in it, you get an Indian, you almost tell. So it started to become apparent that some of the, yeah? Did you stop? 10 minutes. Whoa. Okay, so there's that. Then with the focus on Lagos, we found that language was a way that we could actually bring in the spirit of Lagos into the identity. It's almost impossible to experience football in Lagos without coming across a few language. I mean, I know I've not played football, but I see my friends play football. So we started to think about all of those languages. Now we can incorporate them in the identity. I mean, I couldn't, let me just play that because it's like, it's getting traction. Anyway, so these are some of the languages that we started to explore. By the way, I didn't come up with any of this. We had to source external people that actually play football to help us source the language. Silence. So anyways, so this language paired with excitement and the passion of Lagos, we feel we communicate with the clients and they were excited about what we are leading to. So the concept statement, I think you should.
So for when we started understanding all these things that existed with football as a sport, and especially in Lagos, we were trying to craft a concept statement, and this was something that was going to house the entire identity, and we landed on all roads lead here. And it was a simple statement, especially because football was a unifier, and it was the element that brought a lot of people together. And we tried to just use this as the single defining element, and for So we further narrowed down on that idea, and we arrived at something that felt like a mark that we were really interested in. And at this point, this was what it was looking like, and we animated it just to confirm that the idea of roads leading here was strong enough as a concept and simple enough as a visual device. So the logo had been sorted out to a large extent, and we just tested to be sure that this logo alongside other brands would actually work. So moving on to color, we worked on color, and something that was really important for color was how do we communicate that this is Lagos without being cliche. A lot of times we personally wanted to decide to not even use the color yellow because it felt like everybody knows Lagos is yellow, and I wanted to try and be divergent. But I mean, after a lot of research, we figured that it's better that people understand that this is Lagos and this is the color than we're trying to change or push a different narrative just because we want to do something new. So we arrived at this color palette, and what was important as well was how do we really integrate other colors into the palette so it doesn't feel like we're just having one color and that color is resonating across all the elements. So this was the final color. So for typography,
Yeah, I think my take on the colors, just addition, we'll just do like and run through it. How many minutes left? 5? Okay. So sorry. So for the color palette, like you said, most of the times we find that designers want to design for designers because you want to flex your muscles. Personally, we had a buyer. This book is by Lagos. Just knock one yellow here and put 2 lines. If they say this is a yellow carnival, is a Lagos carnival, slap a yellow there. So we didn't want yellow. But this is another point where we realize that sometimes the clients are right. When they say increase the logo, they actually want the logo to be increased. And you can understand design, but you cannot understand what they are trying to achieve with their business. And design is not what's that? Fine art. It's not applied art. It's not just fine art. It is applied art. Like it needs to do something. So if I need my business to say, enter here, and you're using a small typeface saying, you cannot put it in 14 points now. That's just your design preference. So if your project can accommodate solving the problem and a little of your ego, fine. But I think your ego should actually come in last. So moving on to typography, I feel like some of the consideration for typography for us was, am I speaking too fast? Okay. Some of the consideration for typography for us was that we wanted to take something that was very familiar and make it even more obvious. Like when we were planning, we wanted to make sure that we will not forget something, one analogy. So if you close one eyes, you see that you can see your nose on this side. But we don't actually see our nose. So it is so much in your face that it disappears. So that's kind of how we approach typography. You cannot say you've never seen a plate number, but you actually almost never see it. So what we are trying to achieve is something like you have with the FedEx arrow. Once you realize that that is the arrow, you say, oh, that's the arrow. So when we started to speak with the client, we said the typeface was drawing inspiration from the plate number. Like, oh, so it felt very clever. And okay, that's just some of the other elements of the typeface. And then, yeah, so speaking about language and typography, so the way that we work is as we begin to progress, begin to merge what we already achieved with other things. So this is language and typography together. And this typeface, I think you should speak about the...
Okay. Yeah, so it was also important that the typeface had elements that felt really Lagos-ish and footballish as well. So something we're trying to do was use all the language that exist, like if you miss the ball, no miss the leg, Cochito, all those things. And it was important because this typeface felt like it worked well, especially because it was all in uppercase and it felt like it was always shouting. And if you've been at any football match before, like there's always excitement. So it always feels like everybody's shouting every time. Yeah. So we tested it with the sporting logo type, and it was looking like it worked well. Then we eventually integrated the logo, the typeface into the entire logo. And something that was important again was how do we now push the envelope of this emotional typography, and how do we make type have emotions? So referencing things like this Superman logo or Super Strikers, you can tell that things like goal, power, they have some sort of energy to it. And yeah, and we felt like, how do we really exemplify this in the typeface that we've created? So we worked on things that look like this, and there was Sangalo, Kochi, Bude the ball, last angle. Okay, I don't remember what's next. So there was Besumo, Ojoro Kansu, Alao, and my favorite, Tiao. So all these things started to give us some sort of emotions into how football actually exists in Lagos and how we're trying to integrate it. So next thing we moved on to was the numbering system for the jerseys. And again, we went to the streets of Lagos to see something that already existed with the visual community and something that we could just resonate with. So we created the numbering system and we drew the font. And yes, it was a Lagos-inspired numbering system. And what this was we saw a typeface that looked cool, and we extended it to all the other numbers. And we thought it was really interesting. And this was getting onto, like, the progression we were making was interesting at this point. And we now started thinking about how do we now merge all these elements into one. And that's where we got to layout. So,
yeah, that's essentially what it was about. That. So for the layout system, what we wanted to explore is still 4 minutes. I feel like you're saying wait when you're doing that 5. Anyway, so we felt like I'm distracted. So the layout system is inspired by football formations. Like you find 4-4-2 in football, and you find 3-2-1 and all those type of formations. So we wanted to just use that same approach into layout and just do it in terms of hierarchy. So if you have content to layout, what's the most important part of that content? That's 1. What's the second most important? That's 2. You just place it like that, and then that's all of that bits, like the layout bits, and then we have like this type of content structure for layout, and then it comes to play like this. So that's the most important, and then it kept on going. So it's actually very easy to extend in terms of, as long as you understand the hierarchy in design, you can actually apply the layout. And then so another thing that we wanted to do was, we know that the way that design happens is not always instant, and there's not always time. So sometimes we need a design structure for Instagram. So you need to post something on that spot. So you can't do something that's very elaborate. So we created like skills for design. So there's very simple one, which is just text on the background. There's text and just image, and there's some versions that you can actually go all out with the graphic devices that exist. Yeah, there's this as well. So this is pairing the layout system with the language that we already created. and yeah, more of that, and yeah, more layout. So also for motion, follow the same convention of hierarchy and capturing excitement. So we decided to create things like this, like that. So onto the jerseys.
Yeah, so it was really important again for the jerseys that they looked very Lagos-ish, and we were trying to be very intentional about how we created the jerseys and what the references were. So again, we used Ashoke and very culturally relevant elements, and also looked at artworks that existed in Nigeria. And one thing that we were trying to do was, instead of making these styles feel like we're replicating them, we were trying to understand the underlying message behind all the visuals. And the fundamentals were, there was patterns, there was repetition, movement, and balance. So in working on the home jersey, we wanted to visualize something that felt like the concept statement, which is all roads lead here. And we started looking at visual cues like and everything that felt like this looks like a road, and how do we now apply this into a, yeah, how do we now apply this and create a pattern out of it? So we started exploring multiple things that felt like road markings, and we explored more. We settled on this, and it was really exciting. So
So if you see a lot of the previous one, the one with the one before. So these patterns are actually generated from actually the icon, the brand icon. Just like breaking some part out and creating new patterns. So there's ways that this can actually be extended. Like you said before, some of the underlying principles or fundamentals of Nigerian design style is repetition. If you see any fabric, you find repetition. So this one, Jordan is very excited about this one whenever he speaks about it.
yeah, so what was really important for this was, how do we create a community? And the community starts from one, and from one it extends to plenty. And so we just applied this principle and used it as a pattern to create the jersey. So we now got into the real work, which was, how do we now move from design to production? For context, we're working with designs. We send it over, they produce these designs, then send it back to us in Nigeria. This is a space of like 1 month. Then we give feedback, yeah, physically, and really understand if this is exactly what we're trying to fabricate. Then when we see the first one, it usually goes like around different people, because the founder looks at it, sends it to design studio sends it to this other person. So but on mock-ups they look great. So there were things like and all these things were things that we really did and understood. So as at the time we were really done with the jersey, we now moved over to photographing these jerseys.
I think it's very painful as a designer that you have spent your time designing something, and when you need to produce, you have to like start stripping stuff away. I mean, the final jersey is absolutely brilliant, but what we had before was, would you stop? Okay, this means stop for me, because police will just do like this and stop. So yeah, there's that. I mean, we're actually very excited by the work that we did, and also wanted to say something before. You forgot an analogy. We said we would tell you because it's actually interesting. So if you all went to school, you remember in secondary school, if they punish you alone, it feels like it's the end of the world. But if they put it in it, so it's not about winning. Yes, they will win. They will win. They will win. So I'm not saying they will lose. So it's not about winning. It's about the community. So if we win one hot afternoon, just started testing out stuff, and then we have stuff like this. Yeah, and all of. If you want to clap now. It's okay. 2 minutes more. Then 30 seconds. And then there's all of that bit of the work, like testing, just photography. And then, yeah, again, so like we said before, there's the version you design on Illustrator, and there's a version that actually happens in the real world. So like we said before, the Belongos is a brand identity design and a production design company. So we pretty much understood what it meant to bring something from your computer into the real world. So when it came to game day activation, I think you speak about this.
Yeah, so we actually went out to scout and recce the stadium we were playing the match at, and just to understand how this identity will apply there. So this was the launch day, and we were really excited about how it was looking. This was what the food court looked like. The jerseys in actual play was really exciting to look at. Then also the fans wearing the jerseys were really excited about that. And we also moved that over to OOH, which was, how do we now advertise and push this brand, and how do people know that this exists and there is sporting in Nigeria? So we did a very simple messaging, which is just type with logo, all roads lead here. Then if we want to make it exciting, we can do imagery plus text plus type and color. Then to go overboard, we just do imagery, text, typography, everything, and to now finally wrap it up, we add patterns and make everything look very, very great. Yeah, so these are like the 4 stages that goes from simple to very complex. So this is what the current identity looks like in an overview, and we got a lot of interesting feedback, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for them. So if you have a personal question, you have other people are here. I'm just going to do a quick review and run through of where you should be and what you're going to be listening to in those halls. That's your thing, that's what you're interested in, storytelling, go to the big hall. If you're interested in branding as a marketing tool, and Michael will be talking about it in Emerald. Emerald is upstairs, just beside the big hall. Interested in listening to Victory Brown, she will be taking us on multidisciplinary design handbook. So you're interested in that, that's your thingy. Please remain seated or come forward. Everybody's going upstairs.
I identify as a researcher, a UX designer, a design advocate, a design community founder, a design mentor, and the magazine writer. So I know there are a lot of designers here. You can do graphics. You're a product designer, but you can lay hands on graphics. You can do logo design. Yeah. And there's some of you that could do like illustration and animation. Exactly. And I know you're making money from each of those roles, right? No? I know you're not saying the truth. You're not. After now, just meet these people that are making money. They know the ropes, they'll show us. Okay, so being a multidisciplinary designer means every aspect of design, you have been able to build a foundation, like lay a foundation up to the first floor, and some people even go as much as building up to the second floor before transitioning. A lot of times I tell people, before you start moving around the tech ecosystem, because I understand that it can be quite challenging if you don't have enough resources, but before you start moving around, at least get a foundation, like pick one, and then be a little bit good at it. Talk about it, write about it. I'm not very, although I encourage people to get in and talk about it on Twitter and stuff, I cannot. But I would advise you that if it's your thing, please go ahead and do it, because there are a lot of opportunities there. I was only opportune to scale through without going through Twitter, because I knew people that knew people that knew people, right? So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is building a global tech policy design lab playbook to combat online gender-based violence. The idea of being a multidisciplinary designer is that you understand business goals, you understand society, and then you understand design and how design can help society in this digital age. This is a project I worked on with the World Wide Web Foundation on online gender-based violence. Trust me, when I said this, I had no idea of what OGBV was, because they put it as an abbreviation. I had to go do research because I'm a researcher, right? So I worked alongside for research findings. So remember I said I was a researcher and I was able to bring in my research skill. So at the end of the day, no design skill or no skill at all is wasted. I studied English in school and I'm designing, right? It's always funny when I tell someone, oh, I don't have any computer background. I just moved. In fact, I started as a lawyer and then I went to do English and somehow I dropped out and I'm doing design full time. But I finished because my father would not want to hear that. Anyways, back to what I was saying. Everything that we are today was, foundations were laid to what we are today, to what we are becoming. And every day we learn new things, and sometimes it might feel like it's not important. A lot of times we see tweets on the timeline, oh, who has Pythagoras theorem helped? There are people studying maths in school and it's helping them it's not for you doesn't mean it's not your thing, right? It could come up sometime in the future and it will be very important to you. So what I'm saying here is, for me to be able to work on this project, I needed to have a research background. I needed to have worked with females, right? And remember I said design community founder. I have a design community that is just for women. So I have that. And then I also had design skills, graphic designs, and what I do there is I'm teaching students, master students and professors what it means to use design to create to improve the sustainable development goals. So in each of the 17 or 16, please don't quote zero hunger, right? So this is what it's about. And how did I get those skills? From contributing and the ecosystem was creating a lot of beginner guides in open source, in design, and just everywhere in general, right? So those skills, I've put them together and I'm able to implement them in different walks of life, and I'm bringing impact. The next one, please, right? How did I get into this as a coach? I'm coaching startups on the state of their design. Startups under the German Prototype Fund. What they do is they just state of design in their company. A lot of these startups want to implement design, but they don't have the funds. And I know that designers, if there's one thing we don't like to do is work for free. I know that. Because every time I talk about contributing to open source, the next question I get is, how do I make money from open source? Like, get in the door first. So yeah, what I do there is I talk about design, just like I'm talking now. I look at if you come with a problem, right? Your startup has an issue, and then you're confused. Maybe you have just 4 teams, you have 100K, and you need to expand. But you also need to have a design team, right? Because design is important. You need a working website. If you're going to be pitching your product to someone else, you need a website, and you don't have the funds to pay for this. So how does it come about? So talking to them about design, reviewing their websites, and even going as far as offering them advice on getting interns in handy in all of these things that I do, right? So next slide, please. So there are different design principles, disciplines rather. A lot of people think we are bigger and better, but that's fight for another day. And then we have graphics design, motion design, animators, and all of that. And I know that there are people here who have all of these skills, and it's a good thing. The only thing is that you need to know how to market yourself to do that. If you have me in your company, you don't need to employ any other person. You don't need, because I would do it all. I would do it. So now if you were going to employ 4 people at $1,000 each, right? Okay, let's say you're not going to give me the 4K, but you can give me 3-5. What's the difference? 500, I did bonanza. Yeah, you can do that because I've been able to market myself as multidisciplinary and indispensable, right? In my company, I do social media. I review social media designs, and I also work with the designer that does the design, right? And I also do other things when it comes to research, because where I work is strictly a design company. We plan design events all around the world. So talking to stakeholders, speaking to designers that we want to come over and speak in our conferences is an important skill. And I have communication, good communication skill. I have good writing skills. I can write async. If you want us to have a Google call, I can do all of that. So tell me, if I'm your company, would you go and look for somebody else outside? Why are you like this? You don't want to stress me. I like the stress as far as you're paying me well. So the next one, please. Tips on becoming multidisciplinary. Research. It's very important to research, even as designers, when designing. I talk about research a lot, especially implementing user experience in your research or in your design, because graphic designers somehow just feel like user experience is not important in their design, but it is important in every design, because you're designing for people at the end of the day. Whether you're designing products, you're designing the websites, you're writing something, you're designing a community guide, you're designing a content calendar, at the end of the day, people will use it. So you need to that you're designing for someone. So personally for yourself, if you're going to be a multidisciplinary designer, one thing you should do is research. Find your interest. Where are my strengths? Where does my strength lie? In as much as I do all of these things, like I said, you can't be a master of one, right? You need to build a foundation. Amongst all the things I mentioned, I know I am a very good user experience designer. When it comes to research, when it comes to user experience, I know that I am very good at that. Don't just jump the gun because resources are available everywhere and you want to do everything at the same time. You're going to crash. So that takes us to the next one, master. Pick one and begin to master before moving on to the next. A lot of times we don't master a skill. Like I said, you just introduction to graphic design, you've done 2 flyers on Canva, and you've put graphics designer on your bio, and you are looking for jobs on Upwork, and you're tweeting that there is no job, but you have only 2 graphics design that you use Canva templates to do, right? But if you had done research, if you had expanded your knowledge, you have decided that, okay, graphic design is where I want to start from, and you master it, it's easy for you. But talk about it where it matters. Attend meetups, close spaces like this, talk about it and go home. If anybody does not like your talk or they don't like your design. Document your journey, your transition from graphics. After you finish mastering that one, before you move to the next one, document it and practice. Practice what you learn until you become a master. Practice makes perfect, but perfect practice makes very... Next one. Marketing as a multidisciplinary designer. So now that you know that you can do everything and you can make money from being a multidisciplinary designer, how do you market yourself? Develop a portfolio. Your portfolio should show all of your skills, right? I don't have a portfolio, but I have... I don't have a portfolio, right? So I don't even know how to begin to convince you that you need a portfolio. But trust me, you need it. If you're not the type that talks and you don't have people in your network that you know can vouch for you, please develop a portfolio. And make sure that when you're doing that, each of your skills. As a graphic designer, you have a column for your graphics design. So someone sees that, oh, this person is really multidisciplinary because they do it. So you have your graphics design. If you're a writer, you upload your articles and links to them. If you've done research work, you add it to. So just segment your designer. So use your creativity to, create something that is attractive and actually shows who you are as a designer. Highlighting your skills is part of what it means to develop. One of the things you do when developing a portfolio. Highlight the skills you use. I review portfolios as well, and I see sometimes when I look at your resume, I can't tell what you did in the company because all you did was designer at Havox, September 19, 2021 to September 18, 2022, designed websites. For who? When you designed the website, which of the skills did you use? Right? So you're supposed to break it down. Let me know what you're doing. Let me know all of the skills that you put in place to why they employed you at Havox. No one's going to ask you of course, they know you design website, you're a designer, right? So break it down. Let's know what you did. The next one is utilize social media. Connect with people. Yesterday I came and I connected with a few people because I'm not very good with social media, but now I have to be. So after the talk, please connect with me, I'll connect with you too. So let's start utilizing social media. We have a lot of them. We have Instagram, we have Twitter, talk about it all the time. The next one, please. Okay, how to stay creative as a multidisciplinary designer, because sometimes, because you do a lot of things, you can get burned out, you can get confused, you can lose inspiration. I have a friend that works like all the time. He's always on his screen designing like 10 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours. And I know that some of us here even work more because we work like 2-3 jobs, right? So you can design, you minimize this Figma link for your company and then you move to another Figma link and you're designing. So sometimes it can cause burnout. So how do you stay creative? Find a hobby. Do something else outside pressing your computer. And even when you're finding a hobby, please, gaming. Gaming is a hobby, but it's not a fun hobby. It doesn't like improve your creative house. Go and do candle making. Yes. Go for a paint and sip. Play tennis. Allow fresh air to touch your head. Please, please. Stretch your legs. Stretch your legs. Walk around. Take a ride through the city. I know Lagos is impossible because of the traffic, but if you can, please take a drive around, look at billboards. I know actually designers, all we do is find errors. All we do is, sorry, my time is almost up. All we do is find errors. So please, let's try. Find error, go back to the house and see how you can improve on it. It builds your creativity. Collaborate. Find people and work with. Every time there's a fight on design Twitter about someone stealing design or not stealing design, please, if you're going to steal and give credit, steal like an artist, like they said. Please, collaborate. Don't steal your credit. Say, I worked with this person to do this. A lot of designers are newbies. They're looking for people to collaborate with. As a UX researcher, find a UI designer, find a problem, fix it, give it to the UI designer to design. You can add it to your portfolio. Experiment, try new tools. A lot of us, we only know Adobe. Some people only know Figma. Please, technology is expanding. New tools are coming out that make design work easy. Try other tools. Who knows, maybe you're not very good with this tool. You can be perfect with the next tool, okay? So next one is continuous learning. Please continuously learn. Talk to people, right? Share ideas. If you go out for lunch, I know that sometimes it's not. Any question? Okay, so how I find balance doing all of this thing is, first of all, I have a to-do list that is set in priorities. I have my deadlines added to the top of my list. Like if today I'm supposed to review an article, I have the deadline put there. Sometimes I forget, but then I have someone, right? I work other jobs, right? So even when I work full-time at Design Matters, but my manager knows that I take time off on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Actually, we have work Tuesday to Friday. So I take off Tuesdays and Thursdays. From 12 to 4, I'm out of the office because I have really the thief of time. Procrastination makes you miss deadlines. You can start working doing your work bit by bit before the deadline, instead of just waiting to the deadline, the day before the deadline to, rush in and do your work, because a lot of people, that's what we do. So, yeah, does that answer the question? Okay. Okay, so just give me after that.
All right, let's put our hands together for Victory Brown. Wilfred.
Thank you very much, Victory. Please, if you have any other questions, answer your questions just outside. In the meantime, people are already tripping in, and we have our own very Kachi, right? Kachi is going to be taking this hall, and she's going to be talking to us about thriving as a UX team of one. So you know how this guy asked the question that you're the only person in a startup and like you're doing everything. Damola Adegoke will be talking to everybody about defining your product roadmap as a designer. So you're interested in knowing what roadmaps are and how to define it, go to the Ruby Hall. Ruby Hall is the big one. List Alison Eyo. He will be talking to us on the role of ethical design in user experience, and that will be happening in Emerald. Emerald, Ruby, they're all upstairs. Kachi is here. So please, a round of applause for Kachi as she comes.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for making our time to attend this session. So I'll be talking about thriving as a UX team of one, lessons from the trenches. So it's going to be mostly from my experience and just basically all I've learned along the way. So a little introduction. I'm a product designer at Block, but before Block, I used to work at Talent Cure as a solo designer. And in all of these companies, I remained a solo designer until I left. So it wasn't a case of growing a team. It was just, I should say that. So I role, the opportunities and the benefits from it, and as strategies and the tactics that you can use to manage those challenges. People here are a UX team of one, or you've had that kind of experience. Yeah, I guess that's much, because like in Nigeria, we have a lot of startups, and because startups are trying to save costs, so oftentimes they will resort to just hire one person, popular among startups. And most startups have a low UX maturity. So oftentimes, the people that you're working with may not necessarily understand what UX design is the way you understand it. I've worked in a company where they were like, oh, so you're the UX designer. Okay, design the social media post. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not supposed to do that. And they're like, but you're a designer. So there's always that case of people you're working with don't exactly understand what you're doing. To them, a product is a website, you get, but you have to explain to them that, oh, this is different and all those stuff. So there's always a case of these people don't understand me. Another unique scenario is design is often sidelined. So when you're designing a product, there's the product strategy when you identify the problems, when you're conducting research, when you're like, let's solve this problem, let's not solve that. There's discovery, then there's like the delivery and execution. But design is always introduced into the conversation when we get to the delivery part. But you see those first two, you most times don't even know. Sometimes when they share the PRD with you, you're like, okay, what's this about? And sometimes you don't even have the time to explain in depth, just be designing. As you're designing, will be explaining to you. And it affects like the quality of work you do, because there is no emotional attachment. You don't even, if someone stops you outside to say, oh, you designed this, how does it work? Aside from the Figma link, you don't understand how it affects the business. You don't understand whether the feature is making progress or not. Is it all those other stuff, you just don't know how it works. Then there's this one. You have a lot of tasks that you're overwhelmed with because you might be juggling multiple projects or products at the same time, and there's the case of this is very urgent. Everything is always urgent. So we need this ASAP, we need this now, and if you're not careful, you're going to become really overwhelmed. Then there's creative isolation. You're a one-man army. You're the author and finisher of your work. You do everything yourself. If it's good or bad, nobody knows. Nobody can spot anything out. If you're stuck, you're stuck. So it's just you, yourself, and you again. Then there's imposter syndrome. Everybody battles this, but as a UX team of one, you're constantly asking yourself, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? What's the cost of not doing the right thing? Like, you're constantly asking yourself, if this thing I'm designing is wrong, it's going to cost the business money and I'm going to feel so bad about it. But then again, nobody's going to see it. You're asking yourself, the work I've done, is it good? So there's a lot of, am I good enough? Are you sure? When are people going to discover that I'm a fraud? All those kind of conversations. But yeah, I know I've talked about the challenges and you're like, oh my God. But I should also say that there are benefits that comes with this role, to be very, very honest. First is creative freedom. I know I mentioned it as a challenge, but it is also a benefit because you do everything. And so everything is an experiment, right? And then in this role, you have the ability to experiment as much as you want. If something is not working well, you can decide to change it. You don't need to consult anybody. You don't need to say, the blue button that we're using for this, I now want to change to something else. What do you think? But unlike if you're in a team, you have to report to your team lead and all that. You have to give so many reasons. If you're changing design direction, there's a whole lot of stuff, but that document is just you. And it's easy for you to implement those processes or those changes as you go. Then this is my favorite. You can gain leadership experience. Remember when I said you're not just designing, you're also like a manager, because now you start to have meetings with C-suite executives. You have all those important meetings. You're there. I remember when I was at old school, I used to attend their pitches at Techstars because I was the only product designer. So my boss then will always include me on those type of calls. And it was nice because I was talking with people that on a normal day who bought me. So it was really nice. So yeah, I will talk about how you can leverage the benefits that come with this role and also how to navigate the challenges. But I should say that I'm not an expert and I'm saying this based on what worked for me. So I'm hopeful that we can pick like one or two things that apply to your own unique situations and just use them. So first is define your principles and process. If you're not careful, right, as a UX team of one, you're going to be working on vibes. Like, it's just going to be vibes. You won't have any process. It's take this and you design and you go. But one thing that will help you is always think of yourself as a forerunner, right? You're going to have others coming behind you. And those people can either bless you or curse you, because the foundation you lay is what the organization will get used to, and is what every other person that will be hired after you will have to deal with. So you have to craft the process and principles. Let me talk about principles. Principles are like what matters to you as a designer. For me, one is never make assumptions. If I'm not clear on something, I'm not starting the design for that thing. So I need to understand what I'm working on. Two is be very curious, right? Always ask questions. Then another principle for me was never settle with the first idea that comes to your head. Always iterate. So these principles matter to me. And sometimes I have to like compromise, but I know that this is how I should be working, right? And then for process is, remember how I talked about your product manager might give you a PRD and you work from there, right? But if you want that process to change to something better, you have the ability to make that from the onset. Yeah, so this the process should be flexible because, again, I want this to be very practical. It's not every time that it's going to work step by step the way you have said it. So it should be flexible, but you should be able to understand that, oh, this is the process that I have in place. Secondly is show the value of design. So one thing I noticed is, remember how I talked about design not being included in conversations until it gets to like delivery? Is I noticed that most times it's because other people in the company do not really understand the value that design brings to the table, right? They don't feel like design is necessary in product discovery, or design is necessary in any form of like research, and they feel that they can do it themselves. And design is basically design beautiful screens. So when we're done, let's just give it to them. But you can show your partners the benefits of design. First is preaching the gospel of UX design. You're the only person doing that, so the responsibility falls on you to always educate people about UX design. It's a continual process. You will not see 100% change at once, but it's a gradual thing. Using my own story, right? I remember at Orchestrate, where I'll talk about UX design, how it was important, usability testing, let's know what people think and all that. And what made me really happy was when the marketing team was telling me like, oh, when we have like product demos, we tried something new, catchy. So instead of just showing the customer the product and saying, so we can do this for you, we can do that for you, blah, 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 they tried to make it more experiential. And so they will send the link to the customer and then just watch the customer use the platform. And it was really great for me. And she was all talking about, oh, how UX and all those nice stuff. So yeah, you should also do that, because as you do that, people start to now understand what UX design is. Secondly is move from execution to strategy. You need to become a fighter, not like actual fighting, but you need to fight for a place at the table for design. Don't sit where they are putting you. It's so easy for you to disappear into the background, but don't do that. For example, once they share that document, you can be like, oh, what's this product about, blah, blah, blah. Okay, next time, maybe if we're doing this, can we do it together, right? Or you can reach out and say, oh, I heard over the call that we're currently working on this project. How can I help you? So reach out and try to get involved in those places, because if you wait and it gets to your table for execution, what design is doing then is just like band-aid. Even if you spot a problem at that point, they can't fix it because everything has already been agreed and cemented. So you actively showing interest, right, and saying, oh, let's do this together. We need to conduct research. Because to be honest, you're more equipped to do so many things than they are. For example, research. Designers are more equipped to conduct quality research than other people, because the quality of questions you will ask is different from the way they would craft their own questions. So just being able to demonstrate that value to them really be helpful. Then lastly is leveraging design to help the larger team. How can you do that, right? Again, draw from your strengths as a user experience designer or as a product designer. If you notice that, there's this feature that we're working at, all the partners seem to have different ideas of what this product was. For example, when I was at Talent Cure, there was a product that we were working on, right? And then we had like 3 co-founders in different locations, and I'll have to talk to each of them one by one. And 3 of them just had like different ideas of what the product should be. It was like clear on what the problem was. So draw into your strengths and see how you can help the team. Sometimes it can be they're visualizing a solution and the product managers just have words, so they write a lot of documents. But there's a thing about writing documents. It doesn't make the idea very tangible, right? But with your skill as a designer, using a user flow, you can make it clearer and more tangible for people to use. So just look for your skills and find those areas of problems and intentionally reach out to help them solve those problems. So these are like different forms of map. The first one was the mind map from the workshop that I had. After all that meeting, I consolidated everything, and then we have like an affinity diagram. So we just have different ways that you can use your skill to help like the general team. Then next one is build trust with your partners. So again, remember, you're working as an individual designer, and you're also working as a manager. Now, working as a sick with those people, because, for example, if your product manager says, no, we are not doing it, or more, they are not doing that thing, no. So you need to get them on your side so that certain things will be easier for you. How I do this is, for example, chit chat, and then you just talk about them, ask them what they are working on, how can I support you, what you're working on. It not only helps to, like, it gives a form of emotional connection, because you start to feel like, oh, this person really cares about me. Because to be honest, being a UX team of one can be lonely, because everybody sees you as an outsider. Engineering team see you as the problem, a problem in quotes. Then other things are having meetings with your partners at a point, and sometimes they will laugh at me. I remember the first time they mentioned PR on their, and I was like, oh, product requirements, and they laughed at me because they were like, oh, it's pull request. And as time went on, they started to see me as their friend instead of the whole design versus engineering problems you get. And also, when I know people don't have enough time, these 3 ideas, which will be easier for you to implement, are like, oh, let's do the first. So they start to see you as being part of them. And then when you need their help, it's easy for them to stand. For example, you may say, oh, this color that we're using for this button is not beautiful, it's not this, it's not that. Nobody is going to understand that. But by the time you tell the product manager, this button we're going to use is going to affect, it's going to increase drop-off rate. People are going to drop off because, oh, like, oh, drop-off rate. Okay, so all these metrics are important to them. So find a way to always tie your ideas into their words so that they see that, oh, whatever changes you're working on is also something that's going to benefit them also. Then lastly is take ownership and do it with confidence. It's easy for you to feel like an imposter, but be confident, right? It's your confidence that will help others believe in you. If you don't believe in your work, other people are not going to believe in it. So be confident. Trust me, you're killing it. Then share UX tasks. Don't allow yourself to get burdened. Before you join the company, trust me, there was UX. It's just that UX is bad, but it's not that UX was not existing. It has been existing. So those people, don't try to do it alone. You can reach out to the product manager, marketing team. We need to conduct research on this, blah, 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 blah. Let's do it together. Marketing has the list of all the customers. Product manager can, so 3 of you can join forces and do that, so it feels like less overwhelming for you. Join UX communities. Remember how I said you're responsible for yourself and your career as a UX team of one. Your company cannot help you with that. Even when it comes to performance appraisal, nobody is going to be able to appraise you in such a way that it will be helpful for you and your career, to be honest. But this is where UX communities come into place. You have people there that you can ask questions. You have people there where you can share your work and get feedback on. You have people there who are going to tell you of trends that are existing and how they can help you. So leading in the gap of mentorship that you don't have at your company. And lastly, document your wins and your losses too, right? Write everything. If somebody comments your work, write it down. If somebody says, oh, because of the design you did, write it down. I remember when my boss told me at all school that, oh, Kachi, thank you for convincing, go back and say it's a lie. Look at what people have said about me. Look at what they've said about my work. And also your losses too, because it helps. It helps you to know this is what did not work. This is how I can get better. So I have a worksheet, right? I don't want this to be talk. I want it to be very practical. So what you can do is, on the goals part, what do you want your dream design team to look like, right? Write it there. Now, what are the problems that you're going through that is stopping you from creating that kind of design team? Write them also. Then I know I've mentioned a lot of strategies, so you can write down which one is going to help to manage or to combat any of the challenges. Then write a timeline. So say, for the next 3 months, I want to try this strategy to solve this problem. And at the end of the 3 months, you review it and say, oh, it is. Remember, being a UX team of one is exciting, it's scary, but don't allow it get to you. Don't disappear into the background, be visible, right? Keep experimenting. If a process is not working, change it. If something is not giving you the results you want, change it. And while you're doing all these things, be patient. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of compromise, right? But either you reap the fruit of it, or someone else coming behind you is going to reap that. Either way, that company is never going to forget the effort that you put to help improve.
Thank you so much, Kachi. I know you guys have questions, so I'm just going to do 2 minutes. I'm literally going to have a timer here, and it will be in your face. Then if it dings, you stop talking. Kachi, same thing. I put the timer in your face. It dings, you stop talking, because we're supposed to have lunch. But before lunch, we're supposed to meet in the big hall